So I wanted to do something different tonight for the lesson. There's some gentlemen passing out index cards and pens. If you would, please take one of each. You'll be using them tonight. And tonight I wanted to start with a story about a gentleman that I met a while back. So a few years ago, I was down at Special Operations Command at Fort Bragg, North Carolina for a few weeks to do some training. Nothing intense. Mostly it was office work, I'll be honest. Pretty boring stuff. Well, while I was down there, I met a gentleman named Terry, or at least, that's what he told me his name was. You know how it is down there, Special Operations. Now, Terry was one of those individuals that when you meet them, as soon as you meet them, you just know there's something special about them. Now, at the time, I didn't know what, but I just knew there was something special. So I was down there for a few weeks, and I saw him every day. And after talking to Terry over the duration of my time down there, somewhere in there, I asked him, what did you do before working down here? This is kind of a unique position, especially as a civilian in special operations. What did you do before you came here? And he said, well, I retired from the Air Force, and then after the Air Force, I worked at AT&T. And I was like, all right, well, what did you do while you were at AT&T? And for the sake of time, I'll cut to the end of the story, but Terry tells me that he worked at AT&T, and during the 1970s when he worked there, and this is what he told me, I wrote this down, he wrote the code for an emergency call system that used selected call routing so that the caller can get help fast if they dial a certain universal number. Does that sound familiar at all? Does anyone know what I'm talking about? No joke. Terry wrote the code for the 911 system that we know today. When he told me that, I blew my mind. I seriously just met this guy, right? I thought that was pretty cool, right? Pretty much everyone knows what 911 is. Everyone knows if you need help, you can call 911. And that's where I originally came up with the idea for this lesson. As a Christian, if we need help with something, if we need guidance, maybe we have something going on in our life, probably to a different degree than an issue that we call 911 for. But we're truly blessed that we have the opportunity to be able to just open up the scriptures and have help readily available. And I don't know about everyone else, but I know for me personally, I have certain places in the scripture that I can just turn to on the regular whenever I need it. Verses that I know that are going to help me in times of need, and ones that I can immediately turn to for guidance, and ones that I reference regularly. You could call them my emergency numbers. And that's what I want to share with you tonight. Some emergency numbers that are in the Bible that we can turn to for help in times of needs, or sometimes if we just want a reminder. Now, to be clear, I didn't put these verses together on my own. Another quick story before we get started. The night before I started my initial training at West Point, my mother, a very strong Christian woman, put these references all throughout my Bible with these verses marked. Now, she did this while I was asleep, so I had no idea that she did this. So once I started training, in the downtime, you have the opportunity to, do whatever you want for a little while. I would read my Bible. And I quickly realized I had all these verses marked that she had put in there for me, and I'm very thankful that she did. And these quickly became my so-called emergency numbers that I reference regularly to this day. So by now, everyone should have a note card and a pen. Now, of course, I can't force you to write these down, but I wanted to provide everyone the opportunity to be able to write these verses down if you wish to do so. My recommendation is to write these verses down on the index card as we go through them. And once we're done, stick the card somewhere in the Bible that you can easily reference whenever you may need to. Now, for the sake of time, I also won't share with you all the verses that she marked for me because she marked a lot of verses. So I chose some of my favorites to share with you. All right. So the first one, read when you are tempted. And the verse is 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. 1 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 13. And it reads, no temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man, but God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape that you may be able to bear it. So to put this verse into context, in chapter 10, Paul is writing to the church of Corinth about being tempted, and he says to them, listen, don't be unaware of the examples of those who came before you, Those who came before you were tempted in the exact same ways that you're being tempted. What you're being tempted is not unique to just you. And in verse 13 we read, "Don't worry. God won't put you in a position where it's impossible to resist these temptations. There's a way to escape it. You can bear it." As Christians, this can be a very reassuring verse for us to read. No matter the temptation you have, God won't give you temptation that you're not able to bear. All right, next verse. Read when people are using bad language. And there's two verses for this one. The first one is Colossians 4, verse 6, and Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29. Colossians 4, verse 6, and Ephesians, verse 29. Colossians chapter 4, verse 6 reads, "Let your speech always be with grace, seasoned with salt, that you may know how you ought to answer each one." Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 reads, "Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers." So these verses are interesting because, putting both verses back into context, they both talk about our speech in general, how we speak to Christians and non-Christians, and not specifically bad language, which is very applicable to us, to Christians, because bad language isn't just curse words, it's just how we talk. Colossians chapter 4, verse 6 is talking about our speech always being with grace and seasoned with salt. Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 is talking about our speech not being corrupt, so that it may impart grace to the hearers. Another section is James chapter 3, talks about how powerful the tongue is. So as Christians, it's important that our speech be seasoned with salt so that we can impart grace to those who hear us. Next verse. Read when you think you are too tired or busy to go to worship or Bible study. And the verse is Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 through 25. Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 through 25. And it reads, "Let us consider one another in order to stir up love and good works, not forsaking the assembly of ourselves together, as in the manner of some, but exhorting one another, and so much the more as you see the day approaching." This verse wasn't, she didn't give me this verse to talk about, whether it's a sin to miss a, Wednesday night Bible study. That's a lesson for another time. The bottom line here is fellowship with other Christians is crucial for spiritual growth and perseverance. We support each other. Despite the different backgrounds of everyone here in this room, everyone here has at least one common goal, or we wouldn't be here, right? And what better way to reach that goal than be surrounded by those who can help us grow closer to God? Next verse. Read when you feel weak. And the verse is 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 through 10. 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 9 through 10. And it reads, "And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, and my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly, I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in my infirmities, in reproaches and needs and persecutions and distress for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." This verse is very commonly used, but what is Paul actually saying here? It's a very powerful section if you read the whole thing. And Paul is talking specifically about a thorn in the flesh that he has. And we really don't know what that is. He doesn't specify. But from reading verse 7, we know that it was given to him lest he be exalted from measure. Now, from reading that, it seems as if it was given to him that way he could maintain some sense of humility. And it says in verse 8 that Paul pleaded 3 times that it would depart from him. And what does God tell Paul? What does he tell him? He says, "My grace is sufficient for you." God tells him that his grace is fully capable of providing everything Paul needed to endure the suffering. And in verse 10, Paul says, "Therefore I take pleasure in my infirmities and reproaches and needs and persecutions and distress for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong." Listen, it's normal for us to feel weak sometimes. It's very normal. But we need to trust Christ when we're weak and allow him to be strong in our lives when we're weak. And also not resent him for allowing us to experience that weakness. Now, for the sake of time, I won't go through the rest of the breakdown of the other verses, but I wanted to provide them for you all anyway. So here's some of the other verses. Read when you are scared. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 7. Read when you are chosen to be the leader. Titus 2, verses 6 through 8. Read when you're not the leader. Romans 13, verses 1 through 7. Read when you get your first direct deposit, for those who don't have a job yet, or a raise or a new job for those who already have a job. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 6 through 10 and 17 through 19. My mother knew what she was doing when she marked this verse for me, because when I got my first W-2 job, I made $200 a month, and I thought I was rich. So the final verse that I wanted to share with you is one to read when you are unfocused. And that is 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 24 through 27. And it reads, "Do you not know that those who run in a race all run, but one receives the prize? Run in such a way that you may obtain it. And everyone who competes for the prize is temperate in all things. Now they do it to obtain a perishable crown, but we for an imperishable crown. Therefore I run thus, not for uncertainty. Thus I fight, not as one who beats the air, but I discipline my body and bring it to subjection, lest I have preached to others, I myself should become disqualified." To keep this verse in context, Paul is talking about foregoing personal freedoms in order to bring more people to Christ. We read that in the preceding verses. And to do this, it takes self-sacrifice and discipline, which he shows by using a metaphor of, an athlete training. He talks about an imperishable crown that we will gain. One thing I'm reminded of when I read this verse is that there's no participation trophies for this race that he's talking about that we run. We can run it and fall short. So to run this and win, it requires discipline, focus, lest we become disqualified. This race requires endurance, and we must constantly condition ourselves so that we can actually complete this race and win the prize. And maybe you're here tonight and you haven't, been as disciplined as you may be, as you may need to be. Maybe you've lost sight of the goal, which is obtaining that imperishable crown that Paul talks about. Maybe we have disqualified ourselves from this race. Maybe you haven't even started the race. Tonight, you have the opportunity to refocus, to start reconditioning yourself again to complete this race or start the race. If that's the case, please come forward as we stand and as we sing.